Hello, I'm Philip Stoten for EMSNow. I'm here at Apex 2012 in San Diego, and I'm joined by Charlie Barnhart of Charlie Barnhart Associates. Charlie, great to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, really well. Thanks a lot
Good.
for yesterday. Some really interesting debates. One of the ones that I was particularly intrigued in was the topic of beyond outsourcing,
Right.
and kind of where we're going with the whole regionalization picture. We see some positive feedback from some US contract manufacturers. German guys seem to be having a good time with their high mix, low volume thing. How's that panning out, and what did you learn from the guys you spoke to yesterday?
So what we talked about was a couple things. We talked about what's happening relative to the regionalization movement, how the traction, how much traction has been taking place, kind of what the velocity of that shift was, what kinds of projects are going to be moving back in kind of a cycled pattern and how that's going to happen, what's going to be left in what locations and where things are going to move to. So there's a lot of depth to that dialogue, but we were also talking about who the winners and losers might be. That was kind of an issue of conversation,
Okay.
And so, clearly in each one of these major geographies, North America, Europe, there are low-cost solutions within those regions. And so, it's pretty obvious. Mexico's, because of NAFTA, is an eloquent solution for Canada and the US. It's relatively low cost. In fact, for North American OEMs, by any measure, it's cheaper than China today, right? Yeah, absolutely. With a very few, very, very high volume exceptions.
Right.
We've been through dozens and dozens of these cases and looked at them now, and especially in central Mexico, down in Guadalajara, Monterrey, versus the US border, which is more expensive.
Yeah.
But in Europe, there's still, we have these two locations in Eastern Europe. Some are in Eurozone countries, and some are not, right? And so as the Euro situation evolves and changes in Europe, we'll see what happens. It's going to clearly be an Eastern kind of Europe solution for most of Europe, right? But whether it's a Eurozone country or not, is going to be a real tell, I think, in what happens in the region.
And interestingly, there, India's not so far away. It's kind of
that's right. It's not geographically
we're talking about
that far.
Ukraine and Russia. And
right.
It's not it's a couple more hours on a plane ride, and you're in.
Exactly. So So I mean, as far as we can tell, the only rational reason to go to India is if you happen to be in Europe.
Yeah.
Right. Because otherwise, it's so cross-hemispheric, it's so expensive that there are so many time zones, which is the number one indicator of risk. The biggest factor we see when we analyze failed cases is the number of time zones, not miles. Because if we can actually go up and down in a continent, and we don't see the level of failure on even though there's a lot of miles of difference. For instance, like between Canada and Brazil,
right?
That's halfway around the world. But we don't see the level of failure that if we take that same dimension and flip it around horizontally. So we see one of the key risk indicators is the number of time zones between the producer and the consumer.
Okay.
Yeah. And so India then becomes a pretty good solution, I think, as an Eastern European alternative for certain people. Yeah. Or India. But I think it might also be an interesting solution for Southeast Asia.
Right.
Now there's some places in Southeast Asia that have some real potential that are still, kind of coming up.
Yeah.
And some have some serious problems, as we know.
Yeah.
There's still infrastructure problems, there's still availability of labor problems, there's inflation issues, there's geopolitical problems, and so we'll see what happens, but that might be an interesting solution too for the Southeast Asian industry.
Okay, and specifically in the Americas, you mentioned Mexico. If Mexico's that competitive, why do you think Mexico's struggling to compete? Is there some kind of perception barrier there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple problems. So there's some security issues in Mexico because of the drug cartels and so on. They've gotten a lot of bad press. There's also, remember when everybody left in the early 2000s, everybody left and went to China. Much of this work left Mexico.
Right.
And everybody had to have a reason to do that. The reason they did it is their CEO or CFO got on a conference call with a bunch of analysts.
To do it.
And it was, and so he was forced, or she was forced into it. And then you have to have a reason to do it. You got to go tell these suppliers why you're pulling the work out and sending it to China. It's not jeepers creepers, I need it cheaper. You have to have some rational operational reason. So what was dumped out as an excuse for making these moves was quality.
Okay.
Now for 6 years after that movement started, that trajectory started to occur, I did research on that, and for 6 years I couldn't find any rational data to substantiate the quality issue.
I
wrote articles about that and all this. I think we talked about it in the past. But now there's this transition. The other thing too is a lot of capacity was lost in Mexico, and so now it can only be brought back up at a certain speed and stuff. But they're doing good work. There's it has a very high level of concentration now. Those factories have reached a high level of absorption. Their pricing is very favorable. Still a big investment down there for a lot of people. And some great operations.
And if people want to access that kind of data, the kind of data that you provide on that region, what's that kind of entry point to that?
Well, the best way to get data from me is to join our Outsourcing Navigator Council.
Okay.
And when you do that, you get all the reports that we do. So you get all these data reports that I produce. Plus, you get all our research reports, like this Beyond Outsourcing report that I'm working on. And you also get access to all of our workshops. So you get to come to all the training and learn all the methodologies and stuff like that.
Okay, so not just the raw information, but the ability to actually do something with it, which is key.
Yeah, so it's a three-phase thing for us at Charlie Barnhart Associates. We do core research, we collect data and report it to our clientele, and then we teach them methodologies on how to apply it.
Absolutely.
So a three-step process for us.
Fantastic.
All right.
Charlie, great to talk to you. Enjoy the show today.
Talking to you.
Thanks so much for yesterday, and we'll speak soon.
Absolutely.
Take care.
See you later.